Have you ever been in a conversation where you understand every single word the other person is saying, but you still feel completely lost? It is the most frustrating feeling in the world, isn't it? You are sitting there, nodding your head, smiling, but inside, your brain is working overtime, trying to figure out how all those sentences connect together. You catch the words, but you miss the meaning. I know exactly how that feels because I see it all the time with English learners. You build up your vocabulary, you learn your grammar rules, you practice speaking, but then you put on a podcast or talk to a native speaker, and it feels like they are speaking a different language. But here is the secret that nobody really tells you. The problem is not your vocabulary. The problem is not your grammar. The problem is that you are listening for words, but you are not listening for the glue. You are missing the signals. Every single time someone speaks English, they leave little breadcrumbs along the way. These breadcrumbs tell your brain exactly what is happening. They tell you if something is a reason, if something is a result, if something is a surprise, or if something is just an added detail. If you can train your ear to hear these little signals, everything changes. You stop translating word by word, and you start understanding idea by idea. You start following the conversation step by step, just like a native speaker does. And that is exactly what we are going to do together today. Welcome to English in Fluency. I am your host, Alex, and I am so happy you are here with me right now. Today, we are going to focus on one of the most important types of listening glue in the entire English language. We are talking about cause and result signals. Think about how your brain works in your own native language. If I tell you that it is raining outside, and then I tell you that the ground is wet, your brain automatically connects those two ideas. You do not need anyone to explain the connection, but in a new language, your brain is still a bit slow. It needs help. It needs the speaker to hold up a big sign that says, "Hey, this thing happened because of that thing," or "This thing happened, so that thing happened next." Those big signs are our cause and result signals. A cause is the reason why something happens. It is the root of the problem or the start of a good situation. The result is what happens because of that cause. It is the effect, the outcome, the ending of the story. When you are listening to English at a B1 level, and honestly even at higher levels, speakers will use specific words to point out these causes and results. If you miss those words, you miss the whole point of the story. But if you catch them, the whole story just opens up like a beautiful map in front of you. So today, I am not going to just give you a list of words. I am going to take you on a journey. We are going to listen to some stories about some people, and we are going to follow their ideas step by step. I will pause, I will explain, and I will show you exactly what to listen for. By the end of our time together today, your ears will be tuned to a whole new frequency of English. You will feel more confident, more relaxed, and much more ready to handle real conversations. Are you ready to get started? Let's dive right in. Let's start with the most famous signal in the English language. You probably already know this word, but I want you to start thinking about it differently. The word is because. We all learn because very early in our English journey. I am late because of the traffic. I am tired because I worked hard. It seems so simple. But when you are listening to someone tell a long story, because is like a flashing red light. It tells your brain, stop paying attention to what just happened and get ready for the reason why it happened. Let me give you an example of how this works in a real conversation. Imagine a woman named Sarah. Sarah is talking to her best friend about a new job she just started. Sarah says that she is really unhappy at work. She says the office is beautiful and the pay is great, but she still wants to quit. Now, if you were just listening for vocabulary, you might feel confused. Beautiful office, great pay. But she wants to quit? This does not make sense. But then Sarah says the magic word. She says she wants to quit because her boss is extremely rude to everyone. Do you see what just happened there? Your brain was confused for a second, but as soon as it heard the word because, it knew the answer was coming. The cause of her wanting to quit is the rude boss. The beautiful office and the great pay are just background details. The because signal helped you filter out the noise and find the truth. When you are listening to English, always keep your ears ready for because. It is the speaker's way of saying, I know you might be wondering why. So here is the answer. Now, because is very direct, but English speakers love variety. They do not want to sound like robots repeating the same word over and over. So they use some cousin words that do the exact same job. Two very common cousin words are since and as. When a speaker uses since or as at the beginning of a sentence, they are not talking about time. They are giving you a cause. Let me show you what I mean. Let's go back to our friend Sarah. Instead of saying she wants to quit because her boss is rude, she might say something like this. She might tell her friend, since my boss is extremely rude to everyone, I have decided to look for a new job. Or she might say, as my boss makes me feel terrible every day, I am updating my resume right now. Listen to those sentences again in your mind. Since my boss is extremely rude, I have decided to look for a new job. As my boss makes me feel terrible, I am updating my resume. The meaning is exactly the same as using because. The speaker is giving you the reason first and then telling you the result. But the feeling is a little different. It sounds a bit more conversational, a bit more fluid. When you are watching a movie or listening to a podcast and you hear since or as at the start of a sentence, just tell your brain, okay, here comes the reason. It is a secret signal that native speakers use all the time, and now you know the secret too. Now that we have looked at the cause signals, let's flip the coin and look at the result signals. These are the words that tell you what happened after the cause. The absolute king of result signals is the word so. It is a tiny little word, just 2 letters, but it is incredibly powerful. When a speaker says so, they are connecting a cause they just mentioned to a result they are about to mention. Think about a man named Mark. Mark is talking about his weekend. He says he woke up early on Saturday morning and looked out the window. He saw that it was pouring rain. The wind was blowing the trees. Then he says, so, I decided to stay in bed and read a book all day. That little word, so did all the heavy lifting in that sentence. Mark did not need to explain the logic. He did not need to say, due to the fact that it was raining, the logical result was that I stayed inside. He just said, it was raining, so I stayed inside. When you are listening, so is your best friend. It tells you exactly what the speaker decided to do based on the situation. If you are taking a listening test, or if you are just chatting with someone at a bus stop, hearing the word so should make you perk up and pay close attention, because the main point of the story is usually right after it. But just like with because, English speakers have other ways to say so. They have phrases that sound a little more professional or a little more emphatic. Two of the best ones to know for B1 listening are as a result, and therefore. You will hear these a lot in news reports, in business meetings, or in slightly more serious conversations. Let's take Mark's story about the rain and make it sound a bit more formal. Mark could say, "It was pouring rain all day Saturday. As a result, I stayed inside and read a book." Or he might say, "The weather was terrible on Saturday. Therefore, I spent the entire day in bed." Do you hear how those phrases change the feeling just a little bit? As a result feels like a clear, logical consequence. Therefore, feels like a very strong, undeniable conclusion. When you are listening to a TED Talk or a business presentation, these are the signal words that will guide you through the speaker's logic. If you hear as a result, your brain should instantly recognize that a consequence is coming. If you hear therefore, your brain should know that a strong conclusion is coming. You do not need to stress about the vocabulary around these signals. If you just lock onto the signals themselves, the rest of the sentence will make sense naturally. I want to take a moment to talk about how these signals actually sound in real life, because this is where a lot of learners get tricked. When you read English in a book, everything is perfectly clear. The words are separated by spaces, and you have time to think. But spoken English is messy. Native speakers talk fast. They blend words together, and they swallow sounds. This means that your ears need to be trained to hear these signals even when they are not pronounced perfectly. Let's take the word because. In casual conversation, nobody says because with two perfectly clear syllables. It almost always gets reduced to cause. You will hear people say, "I am late 'cause the traffic was bad." Or even faster, "I am late 'cause of the traffic was bad." If your brain is only listening for the full word because, you will miss the signal entirely. You need to train your brain to hear cause as a cause signal. The same thing happens with so. Because it is such a small word, it often gets attached to the word right before it. Someone might say, "It was raining, so I stayed home." It sounds almost like one long word, raining so. You have to listen for that little SO sound. Even therefore gets shortened in fast speech. People will say, "The weather was bad, therefore I stayed home." They drop the last syllable completely. This is why listening practice is so important. You cannot just learn words from a dictionary. You have to hear them in context. You have to get your brain used to the rhythm of real, human speech. And that is exactly what we are doing right now. You are training your ears to catch the signals even when the speaker is talking fast. Let's put this into practice with a longer story. I want you to close your eyes, or just focus your eyes on one spot, and imagine you are sitting in a cafe. You are sitting next to two people who are talking. One of them is a woman named Emily, and the other is a man named David. I am going to tell you their conversation exactly as if you were hearing it in real life. I will use the signal words we just talked about, and I want you to see how easy it is to follow their ideas when you are listening for the glue. Here we go. Emily starts by telling David that she is moving to a new apartment next week. David asks her why she is moving, because he thought she loved her current place. Emily explains that she does love the apartment itself, but the building is old. She says that last week the heater broke in the middle of the night. Since it was the coldest night of the year, She had to sleep in 3 sweaters under 5 blankets. David laughs and says that sounds terrible. Emily agrees and says that was just the start of her problems. She tells him that the next day a pipe burst in the kitchen. As a result, water flooded the whole floor and ruined her favorite rug. David shakes his head and asks if the landlord fixed it. Emily says the landlord tried to fix it, but he did a terrible job. Therefore, she realized she could not live there anymore. She says the stress of the broken heater and the flooded kitchen was just too much. So she found a beautiful new place across town, and she is moving on Friday. David says he is happy for her, but he will miss having her as a neighbor. Okay, open your eyes. How was that? Was it easy to follow? I bet it was. And do you know why it was easy? Because you were not just listening to random facts about a broken heater and a ruined rug. You were listening for the signals. When Emily said since it was the coldest night of the year, your brain knew that was the reason she was freezing. When she said as a result, water flooded the floor, your brain instantly connected the broken pipe to the ruined rug. When she said, therefore, I realized I could not live there anymore, your brain understood her final decision. And when she said so, she found a new place. Your brain understood the action she took. You followed her ideas step by step, from the initial problem to the reasons it was bad, to her final conclusion. This is the power of listening for signals. It turns a confusing mess of words into a clear, logical story. You did not need to translate every single word. You just needed to catch the glue. This is how native speakers listen. They do not catch every word either, but they catch the important words, the signals, and their brains fill in the rest. Now I want us to look at some slightly more advanced signals. These are phrases that you will definitely hear at a B1 level, and they will make your listening comprehension so much stronger. The first one is due to. This is a phrase that sounds a little bit more formal than because, but it means the exact same thing. You will hear it a lot on the news or in work situations. For example, if a flight is delayed at an airport, the announcer will not say, "The flight is late because it is raining." They will say, "The flight is delayed due to heavy rain." When you hear due to, just translate it in your head to because of. It is always followed by a noun or a noun phrase, never by a full sentence. So you will hear due to the rain, due to the traffic, due to an emergency. Let's put it into a story. Imagine a man named Thomas. Thomas is a manager at a company, and he is giving a presentation to his team. He says, "Our sales went down a lot last month due to a problem with our website." When you hear due to, your brain should immediately perk up. Why did sales go down? Oh, due to a website problem. There is the cause. It is clean, it is fast, and it is very clear. Another fantastic signal phrase is led to. This is a result signal, and it is wonderful for storytelling. When someone says something led to something else, they are describing a chain of events. One thing happened, and that created the next thing. Let's go back to Thomas and his company presentation. He told his team that sales went down due to a website problem. But he does not stop there. He continues his story. He says, the website problem led to a lot of angry customer reviews, and those angry reviews led to a drop in our overall rating. Do you see the chain? The website problem was the first cause. It led to angry reviews. The angry reviews became the second cause, which led to a drop in the rating. When you hear led to, picture a domino falling and hitting the next domino. It is a beautiful signal, for understanding how one event directly creates another event. If you are watching a historical documentary, you will hear this all the time. The war led to poverty. Poverty led to people moving to the cities. Moving to the cities led to overcrowding. It is a chain of results. Once your ear is tuned to led to, you can follow incredibly complex stories without getting lost, because you understand the direction the story is moving in. There is one more signal phrase I want to share with you before we move forward. It is the phrase resulted in. This is very similar to led to, but it feels a little more final. It usually describes the ultimate outcome of a situation. Think about a woman named Rachel. Rachel decided to start running every morning to get healthier. She ran for 3 months without stopping. This hard work resulted in her losing 10 pounds and feeling amazing. The hard work was the cause. Losing 10 pounds was the final result. You will often hear resulted in when someone is summarizing a situation. They might say, "We had a lot of problems with the project, but in the end, it resulted in a huge success for the company." When you hear resulted in, you know you are getting the bottom line. You are getting the final answer. So just to recap our toolkit so far, we have our cause signals, like because, since, as, and due to. And we have our result signals, like so, as a result, therefore, led to, and resulted in. If you can hear these words in a sentence, you will never get lost in a conversation again. I want to take your listening skills to the next level now. We are going to look at some new signals that native speakers use all the time, but that English learners often overlook. We are going to look at how to listen for purpose, how to listen for negative results, and how to listen for hypothetical causes. I know that sounds a little bit technical, but I promise you, by the time we finish a few more stories together, it will feel like second nature to you. The first new type of signal I want to talk about is what I call purpose signals. These are words that tell you why someone is doing something right now, or what they are hoping will happen in the future. The most common purpose signals are so that, and in order to. Now, you might be thinking, wait a minute, is not that just the same as because? It is a great question, but there is a subtle difference that really matters when you are listening. Because looks backward. It explains the reason for something that already happened. So that looks forward. It explains the plan for something that is going to happen. Let me give you an example so you can hear the difference in your head. Imagine a woman named Maya. Maya is talking to her friend about her morning routine. She says, "I drink coffee every morning because I am always tired when I wake up." There is the backward signal. She is tired, so she drinks coffee. But then she continues. She says, "I set my coffee maker to brew automatically at 6 in the morning so that my coffee is ready before I even get out of bed." Do you hear the shift? Setting the coffee maker is the action. So that tells you her goal, her plan, her purpose. She is not saying the coffee maker made her tired. She is saying the automatic timer is designed to achieve a specific result. You will also hear people use in order to in the exact same way. Maya might say, "I wake up early in order to have a quiet hour to myself before the kids wake up." When you are listening to someone explain their process, their job, or their daily habits, keep your ears open for so that and in order to. They tell you exactly what the person is trying to achieve. It gives you incredible insight into their motivations, which makes understanding their whole story much, much easier. Now let's talk about something that catches a lot of English learners off guard, and that is negative cause and result signals. Sometimes in life, things do not happen because of a reason, or a cause stops a result from happening. English has some very specific glue words for these situations, and if you do not recognize them, you might think someone is talking about a positive result when they are actually talking about a failure. The most important negative signal phrases are prevented, stopped from, and otherwise. Let's look at prevented first. This word means that a cause blocked a result. Imagine a man named Julian. Julian is a musician, and he had a big concert planned for Saturday night. He was so excited. But when he tells his friend about the concert, he sounds very sad. He says, "A huge storm came to the city on Saturday. The wind was so strong that it prevented me from driving to the concert hall." When you hear the word prevented, your brain should instantly flash a red warning light. It should tell you, okay, a plan failed. A cause blocked the result. Julian did not play his music. The storm stopped him. Another very similar phrase is stopped from. Julian could have said, "The storm stopped me from playing my concert." It means the exact same thing. The cause acted like a wall, and the result crashed into that wall and never happened. But here is where it gets really interesting for your listening skills. Native speakers love to use the word otherwise at the end of a sentence to show what would have happened if the cause was not there. This is a brilliant little trick of spoken English. Listen to how Julian finishes his story to his friend. He says, "I had to stay home and watch the storm from my window. Otherwise, I would have played the best show of my life." When you hear otherwise, it is like a secret door opening into an imaginary world. It tells you that the result did not happen, but it almost did. Julian is saying, because of the storm, I stayed home. But if the storm did not happen, I would have played a great show. Otherwise is the glue that connects the real world to the imaginary world. It is a fantastic signal to listen for because it shows you how the speaker really feels. Julian is using otherwise to show his regret, to show his disappointment. If you just heard that he stayed home, you might think he was just relaxing. But hearing otherwise tells you that he really wanted to be somewhere else. It adds a massive layer of human emotion to the story, and all of that emotion is packed into just one single word. That is the absolute beauty of listening for these signals. They do not just connect grammar, they connect feelings. I also want to introduce you to a very common way speakers connect ideas by talking about conditions. We use the word if as a signal, and we use the word unless. These are conditional signals, but in spoken English, they act a lot like cause and result signals. They tell you what needs to happen first for the second thing to become real. Let's take a young woman named Chloe. Chloe is applying for a new job, and she is talking to her mother about it. She says, "I am really nervous about the interview. If I do not prepare well, I will probably fail." There is the conditional cause, the lack of preparation is the potential cause, and failing is the potential result. But then Chloe changes her tone. She says, "I am going to spend all weekend studying the company. Unless I know everything about them, I will not feel confident." Do you hear how unless works? It is actually a negative condition. Unless means if not. She is saying, if I do not know everything about them, I will not feel confident. But native speakers use unless because it is faster and it sounds more dramatic. When you are listening to a podcast or watching a movie, and you hear unless, just tell your brain, okay, here is a warning. Here is a condition that must be met, or else something bad will happen. It creates a little bit of tension in the story. You find yourself leaning in, wanting to know if the condition is going to be met. When you can hear unless as a warning signal, you are no longer just a passive listener. You are actively engaged in the story, following the logic step by step, just like the speaker intends. Now, we have talked about a lot of different signals. We talked about because, since, as, and due to for basic causes. We talked about so, therefore, as a result, led to, and resulted in for basic results. We talked about so that, and in order to for purpose. We talked about prevented and stopped from for negative results, and otherwise for imaginary results. And we talked about if and unless for conditions. I know it feels like a big list right now, but please do not try to memorize this like a textbook. You do not need to sit down and write these words out 50 times. Your brain does not learn language that way. Your brain learns language by hearing it in context. That is why I am going to give you another long, detailed story right now. This story is going to be packed with all of these new signals. I want you to relax. Do not panic about catching every single word. Just let the English wash over you. And every time you hear one of our special glue words, just let your brain gently acknowledge it. Let it guide you through the story. Imagine you are listening to a man named Nathan, telling a story about a memorable camping trip he took with his brother. Here we go. Nathan starts by saying that he and his brother absolutely love the outdoors. They had been planning a big camping trip for months. Since they wanted to find a really quiet spot, they drove 4 hours into the mountains. However, due to a sudden change in the weather, the road up the mountain was completely covered in mud. Nathan said his brother was driving very slowly, but the car still slid off the road and got stuck in a ditch. As a result, they were stranded in the middle of nowhere with no cell phone signal. Nathan laughed as he told the story because at the time they were terrified. He explained that they had brought a lot of heavy food with them so that they would not go hungry during the trip. But now the heavy food was useless because they could not even start a fire to cook it. The wet wood prevented them from making a fire. They had to eat cold sandwiches for 2 days. Nathan said they tried to walk down the mountain to find help, but a deep river blocked their path. Unless they could cross the river, they were stuck. They sat in the car and waited, hoping another car would drive by. Otherwise, they would have to spend another freezing night in the woods. Finally, on the second evening, a park ranger drove by. The ranger had a strong truck, and he pulled their car out of the mud. Nathan said the whole disaster actually led to a very funny memory. It resulted in them laughing about it every single Thanksgiving. Nathan finished by saying that next time they will check the weather report in order to avoid getting stuck in the mud again. Take a slow breath. Let that story settle in your mind. How did it feel? If you felt like you understood the whole journey of Nathan and his brother, from the planning, to the mistake, to the rescue, and finally to the funny ending, then you are doing incredibly well. You are listening like a fluent English speaker. Let's just trace the glue one more time to prove to yourself how much you understood. Why did they drive 4 hours? Since they wanted a quiet spot. Why did they get stuck? due to a sudden change in the weather. What was the result of the car sliding? As a result, they were stranded. Why did they bring heavy food? So that they would not go hungry. Why could they not cook the food? The wet wood prevented them from making a fire. What was the problem with the river? Unless they could cross it, they were stuck. Why were they hoping for a car? Otherwise, they would spend another freezing night. What did the disaster lead to? It led to a funny memory. What did it result in? It resulted in them laughing every Thanksgiving. What will they do next time? They will check the weather in order to avoid the mud. You followed every single twist and turn of that story, and you did it without a dictionary, without subtitles, and without stopping to translate. You did it by trusting the signals. The signals did the heavy lifting. I want to talk to you a little bit about the tone of voice that native speakers use with these signals, because this is the next piece of the puzzle for your ears. When you read English in a book, all the words look exactly the same. They are just black letters on a white page. But when people speak, the words are alive. They have music, they have energy, and they have emphasis. Native speakers will naturally stress the important signal words because they subconsciously want you to understand them. If someone says, "I was late because of the traffic," they will usually put a tiny bit more power on the word because. They will say, "I was late because of the traffic." It might be very subtle, but it is there. When they use a big result signal like therefore, they will often slow down just a little bit, and their voice will drop slightly. They will say, "The weather was terrible. Therefore, we stayed home." The drop in the voice tells your brain, this is important. This is the conclusion. When they use a word like otherwise, their voice might go up at the end, showing the imaginary possibility. They will say, "I had to run. Otherwise, I would have missed the train." The rising voice shows the tension of the situation. This is why I always tell my students here at English in Fluency that you cannot just listen with your brain. You have to listen with your whole body. You have to listen to the music of the English language. When you are watching a movie or listening to an audio file, close your eyes sometimes. Just close your eyes and take away the visual distraction. When you take away the pictures, your ears become so much more sensitive to the rhythm and the tone of the speaker. You will start hearing those stressed signal words popping out of the sentence. It is like listening to a song and suddenly hearing the drum beat for the first time. The drum beat is always there, keeping the rhythm, but you were too distracted by the guitars and the singing to notice it. Once you notice the drum beat, the whole song makes more sense. These cause and result signals are the drumbeat of spoken English. They keep the rhythm of the logic. Once you tune into them, you will wonder how you ever listen to English without them. It truly changes the way you experience the language. Let's do a quick mental exercise to lock this in. I am going to give you 3 very short situations. I want you to listen to the situation, and I want you to try to guess which signal word perfectly fits in the blank. You do not have to say it out loud, just think it in your head. This is about training your brain to expect the glue. Here is situation number 1. A woman named Olivia went to the store to buy milk. She left her wallet at home. She could not buy the milk. How do we connect these ideas? Your brain should instantly reach for because or so in that situation. Here is situation number 2. A man named Ethan studied very hard for his math test. He wanted to get a good grade. Why did he study? Your brain should recognize that he was looking toward the future, so it needs a purpose signal, like in order to. Here is situation number 3. A girl named Sophia was walking in the forest. It started to rain. She did not have an umbrella. She got completely wet. The rain caused her to get wet. How do we say that, like a native speaker? You could say the heavy rain led to her getting soaked, or Sophia got soaked due to the heavy rain. You have so many options now. You have an entire toolbox of glue words to choose from. And that is exactly how native speakers feel. They do not think about grammar rules when they talk. They just feel which word sounds right for the story they are telling. And now, you are starting to feel that too. But before we finish today, I want to take you out of the textbook and put you right onto the street, into the real, messy, beautiful world of spoken English. Because the truth is, native speakers do not always speak perfectly. They do not always use the formal signal words we practiced earlier. In casual conversations, people use a different set of glue words. They use phrases that you will not always find in a grammar book, but you will hear them 100 times a day if you are walking around an English-speaking city. If you do not know these casual signals, you might understand every word in a sentence, but still miss the connection. The most common casual result signal in the entire English language is a tiny phrase that sounds so simple you might just ignore it. The phrase is, "That is why," or even shorter, just "That's why." You will hear this in every single coffee shop, every office, and every family dinner. When a speaker says "that is why," they are summarizing everything they just said and pointing directly at the result. Imagine 2 friends, a guy named Liam and a guy named Kevin. Liam is complaining about his morning. He tells Kevin that his alarm did not go off. He says he rushed out the door without an umbrella. He says he had to run to the bus stop in the pouring rain. Then he takes a breath and says, "And that is why I am sitting here in wet socks." Do you hear how natural that is? He did not say, "Consequently, I am in wet socks." He used "that is why" to wrap up his whole story and deliver the punchline. When you hear "that is why," your brain should instantly realize that the speaker is about to tell you the final outcome of everything they just described. It is the ultimate conversational wrap-up. Another extremely popular cousin of that is, "Why is the phrase, which is why." It does the exact same job, but it connects the sentences a little faster. Liam could have said, "My alarm did not go off, and I forgot my umbrella, which is why I am completely soaked right now." When you are listening to someone tell a fast story, which is why acts like a bridge. It tells you that the second part of the sentence is the direct result of the first part. You will also hear people just say, "This is why," at the beginning of a sentence. If Kevin responds to Liam and says, "Man, you really need to check your alarm clock. This is why you should always use your phone alarm instead." Kevin is using "this is why" to introduce a recommendation based on the problem. It is a brilliantly versatile phrase. If you can train your ear to catch "that's why," "which is why," and "this is why," you will understand the conclusions of 90% of casual English conversations. It is that powerful. But what about the cause? How do native speakers casually point to a reason without sounding like a robot? They use the phrase, "because of that," or just "cause of that." Think about a woman named Jessica. Jessica is telling her coworker about a trip she took to the beach. She says the weather was absolutely perfect. The water was warm and clear. They played volleyball and ate great food. Then she says, because of that, we are already planning to go back next month. The phrase because of that takes the entire perfect day and turns it into one big cause. She does not need to repeat the weather or the food. Because of that, acts like a big net that catches all the good details and uses them as the reason for going back. You will also hear people say things like, that is the reason, or that is the reason why. It is just a slightly longer way of saying because. If someone says, I did not sleep well last night, and that is the reason I am so tired today, they are just giving you the cause. The beauty of all these casual phrases is that they are very easy to hear. They are made of simple words. The only tricky part is that native speakers say them so fast. That's why often sounds like one word. Because of that, sounds like cause a dat. But now that you know to listen for them, your brain will start catching them. Your brain is an amazing machine, and once you give it a target, it will find it. There is one more category of casual signals that I absolutely have to share with you before we finish. Sometimes in a conversation, a speaker will say something, and they will realize that the other person might not understand the connection. So they will stop and explain it using a clarifying signal. These are words like basically, or the point is. These are not strict grammar signals, but they are vital listening tools. Imagine Jessica is telling her coworker about the beach trip, and her coworker looks a little confused. Jessica might slow down and say, basically, we had such a good time that we decided it has to be an annual trip. Or she might say, the weather was so perfect we just could not stay away. When you hear basically, or in the middle of a story, the speaker is hitting the pause button on the details. They are saying, okay, forget all the extra words I just said. Here is the main point. The point is, acts the same way. If someone says, the hotel was cheap, the food was cheap, the flights were cheap, the point is, we went on a luxury vacation for almost no money. The point is a giant arrow pointing right at the result. When you are listening to a fast speaker who is talking a lot, these clarifying signals are your lifeline. They pull you out of the details and drop you right back into the main idea. Are you ready for our final, ultimate listening challenge? This is going to be a long story, and I am going to pack it with every single type of signal we have talked about in this entire lesson. I am going to use the formal ones, like therefore and due to. I am going to use the purpose ones, like so that and in order to. I am going to use the negative ones, like prevented and otherwise, and I am going to use the casual ones, like that is why, and because of that. I want you to imagine you are sitting on a comfortable couch next to a man named Oliver. Oliver is telling you the crazy story of how he met his best friend. Do not try to analyze the grammar. Just let your ears ride the waves of the signals. Let the glue hold your hand and guide you through the story. Here is Oliver. Oliver starts by telling you that he has a dog named Buster. Buster is a very energetic golden retriever. Since Buster has so much energy, Oliver has to take him on long walks every single day, even when it is raining. Because of that, Oliver spends a lot of time at the big public park near his house. One Saturday morning, Oliver took Buster to the park. It was incredibly foggy. You could barely see 10 feet in front of your face. Oliver decided to let Buster off the leash so that the dog could run around and burn off some energy. He threw a tennis ball into the fog. Buster ran after it, but he did not come back. Oliver waited for 5 minutes, then 10 minutes. He started to panic. He began running through the fog, calling Buster's name. He ran for so long that he completely lost his sense of direction. Consequently, Oliver realized he was completely lost in the park himself. He felt very silly. He sat down on a wet bench, thinking he would have to call the police to find his dog, and maybe even to find himself. Otherwise, he would be wandering in the fog all day. Suddenly, he heard a strange noise. It sounded like someone chopping wood. He followed the noise through the trees. The sound led him to a small clearing where a woman named Hazel was building a tiny wooden shelter for a group of stray cats. Oliver asked her if she had seen a golden retriever. Hazel laughed and pointed behind him. Buster was sitting right there, happily eating treats out of the hand of another man. Oliver was so relieved. He thanked the man, grabbed Buster, and turned to Hazel. He told her that what she was doing for the cats was amazing. She explained that the winter was coming, and unless she built these shelters, the cats would freeze. Oliver was so impressed by her kindness that he offered to help her finish the shelter. They spent the next 3 hours building cat houses, together in the fog. Due to the fact that they worked so closely together, they started talking about their lives, their jobs, and their hobbies. They realized they had a ton in common. That is why they exchanged phone numbers before they left the park that day. They started meeting at the park every weekend to walk their dogs and feed the cats. This routine resulted in them becoming absolutely inseparable best friends. Oliver looks at you, smiles, and says, "People always ask me how I met my best friend. I always tell them, I got lost in the fog because my dog ran away." And that is basically the whole story. But in order to really understand it, you have to know that getting lost was the best mistake I ever made. Wow. Just take a moment to let that story settle. Think about how much information was in that story. Think about the twists, the problem of the lost dog, the problem of getting lost, the discovery of the woman building the shelters, the explanation of the cats, the hours spent working together, the exchange of numbers, and the final friendship. If you did not have the signal words, that story would just be a massive pile of facts. But because you were listening for the glue, it was a smooth, logical journey. You knew exactly why Oliver was at the park, because of his dog's energy. You knew why he let the dog off the leash, so that the dog could burn energy. You knew why he got lost. Consequently, you knew why Hazel was building shelters. Unless she did, the cats would freeze. You knew how they became friends, due to the fact that they worked together. You knew why they exchanged numbers. That is why. And you knew the final result. This resulted in them becoming best friends. You followed every single step. You understood the emotion, the relief, the kindness, and the joy. You did not just hear English. You experienced a human connection through English. And that, my friend, is the true definition of fluency. I want to leave you with one final thought as we close out this masterclass on cause and result signals. Learning a language is a lot like building a house. When you first start, you just have a pile of bricks. The bricks are your vocabulary words. You have a word for dog, a word for park, a word for happy, a word for friend. But a pile of bricks is not a house. You cannot live in a pile of bricks. To build a house, you need cement. You need something to hold the bricks together in a strong, solid way. The signal words we have practiced together. Words like because, so, therefore, unless, that is why, and resulted in, they are the cement of the English language. Without them, you just have a pile of words, but with them, you can build a beautiful, strong house of communication. You can build stories. You can build friendships. You can build your confidence. Every time you listen to English from now on, do not just look at the bricks. Look for the cement. Look for the glue. It is everywhere once you start noticing it. I know that improving your English listening can sometimes feel like an impossible mountain to climb. There are days when you will put on a movie and feel like you understand nothing. There are days when you will talk to a native speaker and feel your brain freeze. I want you to remember this lesson on those bad days. I want you to remember that you do not need to understand every single word to understand the message. You just need to find the signals, find the because, find the so, find the that is why, and let them guide you home. You have the tools now. You have the map. All you have to do is keep walking. Keep listening to English podcasts. Keep watching interviews on YouTube. Keep having conversations with people, even if it is scary. Every minute you spend listening with your new signal-focused ears is a minute you are getting closer to your goal. I want to thank you from the very bottom of my heart for spending this time with me on English in Fluency. I am Alex, and making these lessons for you is the absolute best part of my day. Knowing that I can help you unlock your potential and understand the world better means everything to me. If this masterclass on listening signals helped you, please do not keep it a secret. Share this video with a friend who is also learning English. Hit that subscribe button if you have not already, and please leave me a comment down below. For your final homework, I want you to use the phrase, that is, why, in a comment. Tell me something you love, and then tell me that is why you do it. I will be right there in the comments reading your beautiful English and cheering you on. You have worked incredibly hard today. You have taken a massive step forward in your fluency journey. Be proud of yourself. Take a deep breath, smile, and go out there and listen to the world. I will see you in the next video. Bye for now.